Welcome to paradise as we unveil this plaque which marks the site of the original Celtic Park on the 128th anniversary of its opening on 8th of May 1888. As we stand in the shadow of this magnificent ground, which would be beyond the wildest dreams of our founding fathers, how many would pause for a second to reflect on this hallowed ground here, where Brother Walfrid watched the early Celts grow, where Neil McCallum scored their first goal, and where we built a club to be proud of in 4 short years. Hopefully this plaque will remind fans of where we've came from and the importance of remembering our roots and the humble charitable ethos behind our foundation. We welcome today's speakers: Lisbon Lion, Celtic Graves patron Jim Craig, a man who not only knows his history but played a significant part in our greatest ever era. They say Leicester City's fantastic achievement was the greatest ever fairy tale, but for me, 11 men from within 30 miles of this very spot winning the European Cup was even better. Next, we welcome another Celtic legend, a supporter who lived the dream and was one of the finest players to ever wear a Celtic jersey. He is, of course, the maestro, Paul McStay. Please give Paul a big welcome. There's no pressure on our next speaker to follow that. The Celtic FC Foundation Chief Executive, Tony Hamilton. Tony is a great friend of the Society, and it's fitting that Tony is here today representing the club's continued charitable work, just as Brother Walfrid would have wanted it. Last but not least is our raconteur extraordinaire. You love that. Terry Dick, the son of Glenn Bailey. Anyone who has heard Terry speak at our events will know if there's one man who can bring the Celtic story to life and paint a picture as if we're all there witnessing it, then it's Terry. We then get Paul to unveil the plaque. This isn't actually the plaque, this is just a bin bag full of it. Things were tight, but no, that's it. And then we'll take the opportunity to lay some flowers before we'll close the ceremony with some words of thanks. We can get some pictures taken with the legends, and of course the plaque. Ladies and gentlemen, the Celtic Graves Society. We planned it for before I came. We couldn't get a priest to bless the plaque because it's Sunday morning and now we've got a crowd, nobody can hear me. The Celtic Graves have wanted to mark this hallowed ground for a number of years, and what we wanted to achieve is a visual reminder, telling the story of the first ground and also providing an image so supporters can stand on this very spot and look round. We'll join in and imagine what the scene would have looked like at our foundation. The corner of this graveyard wall was the boundary of the original ground, and the sketch that you'll soon see, it's the same sketch on the front of the booklet, was drawn from the press box which stood just a few feet away in the southwest corner of the original ground, looking north, with the pitch running north-south. Along the length of Janefield Street here was a wooden perimeter fence, and the main entrance to the ground was on Springfield Road, just around the corner. There was a total of only 7 entrance gates, which quickly extended to 10 as the crowds flocked, with as many as 25,000 packing into a ground that held around 10,000. In September 1889, when we drew the establishment team Queen's Park in the first round of the Scottish Cup, the away team were forced to climb through adjacent gardens and over the perimeter fence to gain access. Such was the size of the Celtic crowd. But it was a modest ground with no fancy trappings, as we were a club born to fund the maintenance of the poor children's dinner tables. The open air pavilion stood on the east side of the pitch, and around the ground was a primitive unbanked terracing on 3 sides. 2 years later, in 1890, another open-air stand similar to the pavilion was built along this graveyard wall as Celtic Park tried to adjust to the demand. The cream of England all flocked here. In 18 friendlies, we only lost one match. In fact, in almost 100 matches played here from 1888 to 1892, we only lost one competitive match. Significantly, this was the only ground that Brother Walfrid knew, for in the same week that he was transferred to London, the current Celtic Park was opened. The landlord, who raised the rent on the old ground tenfold and forced us to relocate a couple of hundred yards down Janefield Street, had done us the greatest favour ever, as we had outgrown the original Celtic Park and a meteoric rise in only 4 years, as the Irish diaspora in particular thronged to the club in their thousands. As you'll see on the plaque, the rest, as they say, is history. Thanks very much. I'd like to introduce.
Thank you very much indeed, Brendan. Ladies and gentlemen, it will come up as no surprise to most of you that the Glasgow of 1887 bore little resemblance to the Glasgow of 2016, except in population. That had grown from 200,000 in 1830 to 500,000 in 1870, and by the time 1887 came along, it would be over 700,000, which led to overcrowding in some parts of the city. In both the Calton and St Rollops, the three first places you meet as you go into the city and it's north of the city, there was an average of 340 to 350 people per acre. Now, an acre is roughly 2/3 the size of a football pitch, so that is serious crowding by any standard. And of course, when you get overcrowding, you get disease. In 1884, deaths by whooping cough were 667, measles, scarlet fever 421, measles 353, smallpox 12, and diphtheria 174. By 1887, Glaswegians were still being carried around the city in horse-drawn carriages, and the carriages were actually set on wheels. It was quite an elaborate system right throughout the city, and they were drawn by 2 horses, so quite a bit of manure must have been on the roads at that time, I should imagine. And these trams carried people to work for half fare between 5 AM and 7 AM, although even at full price it was only going to cost you 1 penny. One of the big problems in those days as well, and it's and a problem nowadays as well, was the drink. In 1887 there were 2,000 licensed premises in Glasgow. In the Gallagate there were 79, and the Salt Market had 56, and the Bruma lost 65. Naturally, this contributed to the offences committed in the city, which in 1888 were drunk and incapable 14,944, of whom only 155 were acquitted, so we can assume the others were well and truly wrecked to be picked up like that. Begging and destitute, unfortunately 404 arrested in those days. Reckless driving, which would be horse-drawn carriages, 293. Obstructing the police, for those of you who think there's any problem with that, 148 were arrested. Throwing stones to the annoyance of passers-by, 220. Offering indecent goods for sale, 6. Prostitutes importuning, that means turning up for work, 2,631. Deserters, 59, which gives you an example of the state of the army at that time. Falsely impersonating the chief constable, 1. And this final one, I'm kind of mixed feelings about. I mean, I think that it was dreadful at the time that you should have arrested 36 people described as lunatics because they were mentally deficient. On the other hand, it thinks to me that Glasgow hasn't changed a great deal, because on any Saturday night in Glasgow, you can at least meet 36 lunatics going about your normal job, you know. So these were the conditions in which the fans of this new club were living, or being surrounded by. And frankly, Brendan's, given us a build-up to the ground and a description of the ground. It was a remarkable piece of work, because there were some advantages to doing the job in the first place. getting a team involved of labourers, workers, builders, brickies, everybody that could help with the job with that. The first thing you had to do. And then you had a weather problem. Now, it's 8th of May and the weather this morning has not been terrific. I checked the weather forecast, I didn't bring the and the months of December, January, February were not great. They'd snow in February, freezing cold in March. So they were limited by that as well. And in those days there was no clocks going forward and clocks going backwards to help hours or daylight. You just had to hope that when the sun came up and the sun went back down again. In the 1st of November, sunrise was at 7:30 AM and sunset was at 4:46. On the 1st of December, the sun came up at 8:29 and went down again at 3:58. 1st of January, 8:54, 4:03, 1st of April, 2 months ahead, gone to 6:56 for sunrise and the sunset at 8:02. So when you consider that all those things worked against the guys who built this particular ground, it was a remarkable piece of work to do it from the 6th of November 1887 to the 8th of May 1888. And we should be proud of the joy, proud of the job they did, and we should always remember them from their thoughts. Thank you.
Good morning everyone. I'm honoured to be here today to take part in this ceremony. I think it's a very important thing that's happening today, I think for generations to come as well, because it reminds us all about where it all started, the foundations of this great club, and I think we're all very proud of our history, and hopefully we're writing our history today by winning the championship. It's very important for these young people here, and they're all put out. But I'd just like to congratulate Celtic Graves on what they do as well. Again, it's just a job and I hope you all support them as much as you can. But again, just very proud of their club's history and happy to be here.
Thanks so much, Paul. Really fortunate to have a lot of really impressive guests at our ceremonies, but the performance here today is remarkable. Thanks again, Paul.
Thanks, Trent.
Morning everyone. I like first of all to add my thanks to Celtic Graves, and I do this at every opportunity and every time that I'm honoured to be asked to speak at one of these events. I think what everyone does in Celtic Graves Society is absolutely remarkable to keep our history alive, and I think when Celtic played here for this period from 1888 to 1892, we were told that a football club would be formed for the maintenance of dinner tables for the children and the unemployed. We're no longer in Victorian Britain, and we're no longer have the poor children's dinner tables. But fast forward 130 years, and for a lot of people in society, not a lot has changed. So we support, and I mean we collectively support, a food bank 400 or 500 yards from here in the Church of Scotland in Unveil Street, and it's not 1887, it's 2016. I think nowadays people talk about, in terms of charity, they talk about corporate social responsibility. It's not a phrase that we use. But as a football club and a charity, our social responsibility is to be successful. It's to have a successful football team. It's to have heroes such as Jim Craig and Paul McStay and Ray Griffiths and Scott Brown and so many others that have came through the years. And I think from there it's to create a team and a football club open to all, and a team genuinely for the people. And we know that we're not the actual people in the but a team for the people in this community and beyond. And I think from there, that success transfers to charity, and now in Celtic FC Foundation as it is today. And the work of Brother Walford goes on in terms of helping marginalised people, again in this community and beyond. And we only do any of this with your help. So on behalf of the club and its charitable arm, Celtic FC Foundation, thank you for your continued support, and thank you for having us here today.
Good morning everyone, it's great to be here. And there used to be a ballpark where the field was warm and green, and the people played their crazy game with a joy I'd never seen. And the fans, they'd watch and wonder how they laugh and how they cheer. Yes, there used to be a ballpark right here. A haunting lyric expressing a sense of loss and sadness at the disappearance of two well-loved and iconic New York City sports grounds, Ebbets Field in Brooklyn and the Polo Grounds. Our emotions today, as we come to the mainly forgotten site of the first Celtic Park, are those of pride, celebration and commemoration. It is a place built by supporters, referred to affectionately by Brother Walford as the Old Quarters, where, as Willie Maley said, that wonderful scheme of things came to fruition. Its golden period was in the late Victorian era, when as distinguished actor and author John Kearney, a Parkhead boy from that street down there, says that the first Celts breathed a finer kind of air. Queen Victoria, Empress of India, had reigned for over half a century, and in this day in 1888 she opened the International Exhibition of Science, Art and Industry at Kelvin Grove Park. The greatest investigatory minds at Scotland Yard were baffled by the bizarre and violent murders in Whitechapel. The game was afoot for the very first time as Holmes and Watson embarked on their study in scarlet, while Glasgowians had no fear in a darkened close or even a pen because Bram Stoker's Dracula hadn't taken his first bow. Entertainment greats who would find fame in the modern era, comedy legend Harpo Marx, the epitome of style Maurice Chevalier, and renowned composer Irving Berlin were born that year. Gauguin, Van Gogh, Yeats and Wilde were still enriching the arts, while in Helensburgh, John Logie Baird had made his first appearance in the world, the medium he invented, destined to become the greatest vehicle for the global popularity of the beautiful game. The first Celtic Park is a heritage site, central to the Celtic narrative, and always held deep in the folk memory of the East End Celtic supporting community. The Celtic Park of today, with its soaring stands dominating the skyline, dressed now in that evocative and visually stunning pictorial collage, fronted by the impressive Celtic Way, is indeed a paradise. But the modest ground behind us here in Dalmarnock Street, in the words of a music hall favourite of the time, was a little bit of heaven for those early supporters and the team. It was here that Celtic became the people's team, the birthplace of that unique, intimate and unshakable bond that exists between the Celts who watch and those who play. It was surely this which enabled the emergent Celts to succeed and to thrive where long-forgotten emeralds, shamrocks, harps and errands had failed. More than a century before the phrase was coined, Celtic were more than a club, committed from the very, very beginning to equality, to tolerance, social justice and charity, completely shunning sectarianism and any form of bigotry. A 128-year-old charitable dimension began right here, continued today by the Celtic Foundation that works tirelessly and with boundless generosity to aid those in the most need. A close and unique affinity with supporters was developed here, which continues to this day. For example, with what other team would legendary manager Jock Stein stand at Ridley Lights, flagging down supporters' coaches to intimate a late cancellation at Dundee? or the wonderful Tommy Burns have broken away from cup final celebrations to go on national television to tell a wee lad in hospital that he would visit him the next day. Or where a star player, Georgios Samaras and superfan Jay Beattie would impart upon their own very unique and personal kind of lapabona. The early years in this tiny ground were exhilarating. An enthusiastic, driven and professional committee almost immediately established Celtic as one of Britain's top clubs. One historian tells us that in their progress towards the very top, nothing seemed to daunt their enthusiasm or stay their enterprise. The tramp of feet had not yet been heard in Janefield Street, but the supporters were flocking in thousands to the new Celtic Park. It was hosting cycling and athletic events. It staged prestigious friendlies against the great English sides, Everton, Blackburn, Burnley and Preston North End. Top amateur side Corinthians were here, as well as Notts County, the world's oldest football club. They were all welcomed to Celtic Park. And indeed, it had some notable firsts. The team's first competitive victory over Rangers in the Scottish Cup of 1890, the first ever Scottish League match, and perhaps the first recorded incidents of psyching out of opponents, so prevalent in the modern game, even more effective than the Bruni or Scott's steely stare. They completely unnerved opponents, Queen's Park, by a simple, brilliant Celtic tactic. They locked them out the park. I don't care what anybody says, we should use that in Europe. Goal nets were first used on New Year's Day 1892, amid fears, by the way, among the medical profession that they may have had an adverse psychological effect in custodians who, as Handley's history says, may have been bound in by saucy doubts and fears. On that day, there was a show business element. Colonel Buck of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, a VIP guest of the day, was invited to kick off. He should have brought Sitting Bull with him, as the result was an even greater disaster than the Little Bighorn. Unfortunate goalkeeper Tom Duff, his judgment impaired by illness and the fact that he'd had a slight refreshment the night before, conceded 8 goals to Dumbarton. He never played again. The old stadium's last hurrah was a glorious one on the 1st of June 1892. Rangers were defeated 2-0 in the Charity Cup final. The Celts securing the first cup treble in the history of the Scottish game, prompting one supporter, Ned McGinn, to send a telegram to the Pontiff, Leo XIII. Holiness, we've won 3 cups. But appropriately, the last kick of the ball in the old park here was for charity, a friendly, providing fund for the Irish Evicted Tenants Fund. And then, like Walfrid, that year, it was gone. It was here that players experienced the thrill of pulling on the famed green and white colours of the club and experienced the pride and the exhilaration of being a Celt, of receiving the adulation of an adoring crowd, of knowing that it was indeed a grand old team to play for. And the players were all grand. A galaxy of stars played here and made the Celtic the best darn team in Scotland, playing football that thrilled and entertained. James Kelly, the club's first captain and internationalist, a future chairman, and perhaps the first player ever to celebrate a goal with a triple somersault, Willie Maley, 50 years of Celt, an incomparable manager, the man who built the Celtic. Handsome Tom, his brother, with matinee idol, good looks. Neely McCallum, the shadow, Celtic's first goal scorer. Goal machine, Sandy McMahon, the Duke, tearing defences apart with his pace and with his power. Double winner on both sides of the border, Johnny Campbell. McLaren, the old general, a hero against England, scoring a winning goal at the Oval. The first superstar Celt, Willie Groves. And Jerry Reynolds, the man with the iron head, who long before a famous US TV talk show was greeted with chants of Jerry, Jerry. The master of back heels, flicks, feints and swerves, Johnny Madden. And of course, the wild rover, Dan Doyle, who on his deathbed said that at least his old legs had made a little bit of Celtic history. Contemporary pundits hailed them as they developed a distinctive and trophy-winning style of play. They were fast, they were clever, they were irrepressible. They played pure, unadulterated soccer. They were hailed as perfect exponents of the game, into which, by the way, they breathed new life. But this Victorian band of brothers had an added advantage that no one else could claim. They were imbued with the spirit of Brother Walfrid. They were driven by the dynamic leadership of John Glass. They were inspired to play for a people and a cause by the altruism of Dr. John Conway. And they were winners. On the 28th of May, in front of 2,000 spectators, Rangers Swifts were defeated by 5 goals to 2. But this just wasn't a sporting victory. It marked the birth of an institution with a unique social and a moral dimension that would bring distinction and pride to a community and a great city. Celtic's first honour, the North Eastern Cup, was secured in March 1890. A treble won, including the Glasgow and the Charity Cups. In 1892, the team celebrated its first Scottish Cup win. The Calton was filled with marching bands and cheering crowds. All was described as a perfect turmoil. The East End was in carnival mood as the bold Bahoys brought the cup back to St Mary's Hall. The Celtic were now billed theatrically as the greatest team in the world. They were box office, and their gates reached, and income reached, fantastic proportions. Attendances of up to 10,000, with half as many again locked out. And the supporters, as today, were faithful through and through. Marching through the streets, blowing bugles, waving banners, singing and cheering. They were inspirational in victory. In defeat, they were indomitable. A journalist of the day gave them fulsome praise. The Celtic are blessed with a following that simply defy the elements, whose enthusiasm for their own side is never lukewarm. Today's stadia may have their cops and curvas, sheds and shelves, clock ends and halts. We ourselves had the world-famous jungle, but the first Celtic Park, it had the cemetery wall. The favoured stance of the less affluent patrons, a good viewing position certainly, but a precarious perch if the huddle of today had been attempted. They drank ale and ginger beer, they ate meat pies, pig's trotters, saltfish, eels and whelks, hot chestnuts, and they're still selling them over here, boiling sweets. And perhaps on the way home, they treated themselves to the big new thing, un poco gelato, which by this time was known universally to Glaswegians as a wee pokey heart. The team that played in that first ground were everything to them. Campbell and Woods defined the Celtic's importance. The Irish seized upon Celtic as a symbol of hope. Pride in the club's success was a sublimation of appalling living and working conditions. On a Saturday, exulting in victory, they could exact some revenge for the rest of the week. Yes, there used to be a ballpark right here. A dear green place, gone now, but today not forgotten. The first Celtic Park, here at the very dawn of our club's history, of dreams, of hopes and of aspirations. Make no mistake, the legends passed this way to play for what Tom Maley called the greatest and the best of all athletic and football institutions. Today, in the shadow of the magnificent dear old paradise, we honour its modest but distinguished forerunner and the evergreen memory of all those whose idealism, playing skill and unwavering support gave us the gift of the Celtic.
One and only, Eddie Dick. That's Paul and Jim. Round the other flag, please. Actually, up. Down. No.
Jim, just nice here.
Finish your back here, guys. Thank you. Tony, do you want to do a picture with all the guys just before we finish here?
Brendan. We've got a few minutes to go here yet. Hold that for me, Tom. It's sticking out my pocket. We'll get photographs after. Brendan,
you come over here. Just come out the picture. Here we go, guys. Just into this camera for a couple of shots and Joe Mike. Here we go. Thank you. Guys, just here if you don't mind as well. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
if anyone would like to lay some flowers, the Celtic Graves Society have got young Jay Beattie to lay the flowers for themselves. Young Jay.
You just stand there for a wee picture every second, pal, right? Turn round a wee second, Jay. Thank you. Nice big smile. Good lads, well done. Well done, pal. Thank you.
Well done, Jay.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. In closing, I'd just like to thank everyone for attending and making this event so special. After Jim's crime report, thankfully we've got cameras everywhere to look after this plaque. But I think the best security possible is a large image there of Willie Maley looking over the original Celtic Park. No one messed with Willie Maley as a player or a manager, and I don't think anyone would mess with him now. Thanks very much. Just see everybody.
there's booklets here if anybody would like one as a memento of today. Guys are selling them over there. Thanks very much. All the money goes towards helping us for any future commemorations.
Church down the Calvin Way. Brother Walter's plan was set in 1888. The club was born to feed the poor, Celtic was his name, and that was Brother Walford's dream. God had given him the strength to fight for good and rights, and he has given us the team that plays in green and whites. From Irish shores to Scottish hearts and all that's in between, that was Brother Walford's dream. We see no colour, we see no race nor creed. We stand together, that was Brother Walford's dream. I know he's looking down on us and smiles on what he sees. In this place called paradise, united in belief. Through the wind and through the rain and throughout history, we won't forget our brother's dream. We see no colour, we see no race nor creed. We stand together.